Hello, this is Antiviral, and it's October 22nd. This is a video on all the COVID booster. You really don't want to miss this video. Lots of good information on vaccine effectiveness. A quick summary of the good, the bad, and the ugly. On the good side, the great news in the US is the Delta case incidence has dropped by over 50% in the last 2 months. 77% of Americans over the age of 12 have at least one vaccine dose, which is probably what's driving the drop in the infection rate. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on the vaccine effectiveness of Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J and the approval that they got from the FDA and the CDC literally last night. And we also had some new information on the new oral drug that Pfizer has worked on that you can use on an outpatient basis, and it's now filed with the FDA. Globally, we have 48% of the global population that has at least received one dose, which is astonishing. On the bad news, Europe is unfortunately bouncing back, and there's a new Delta Plus variant that is emerging in the UK. We need to keep an eye on that. We're going to spend some time looking at the data that the CDC and the FDA use to make their decision on the booster, showing the decline of vaccine efficacy. We're going to break it down by Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J. And also some data showing that the US death rate per 100,000 is correlating with the lower vaccination states. On the ugly side, we have unfortunately some very sad milestones. The excess worldwide deaths is now estimated to be at 16 million people worldwide, and COVID is now officially the deadliest disease in the US history, with over 734,000 people have passed away. So I need your help. YouTube has changed their algorithms, and I need your help to basically help spread the word. If you like and you value this channel, please subscribe to it so you can get the new update. I'm going to do 2 videos this week, and one that you're seeing right now and another one that I will post on Sunday on long COVID. And please, the long COVID is a review of everything that we know about long COVID. I do believe that we will define this disease COVID as not by fatality, but by the fact that we have such a high percent of the population that has this long-term problem. So you don't want to miss that video. It's a special. So let's look what's going on. The good news is the US is going down. That's kind of the reddish color here. The bad news, something is going on in Europe. Germany, Belgium, United Kingdom, the Netherlands are all going back up. And especially Eastern Europe. You can see Poland and some of the Eastern European there are having a bit of an outbreak. And what we need to keep an eye on is a sublineage of the Delta variant has emerged in the UK. Remember, the UK does an incredible job at doing sequencing, and they have now monitored that up to 66% of the sequence now are from that Delta Plus variant, which is called AY4.2, which is a little bit more infectious. We're still hoping that Delta is so infectious that it doesn't get a footprint, but there's clearly something going on in Europe in the last really 4 weeks that we need to keep an eye on to make sure it doesn't happen in the US. As far as the variants of interest, we talked in the past about this mu, which is this yellowish color there. And good news, bad news is Delta is so contagious that it's literally squashing the other variants out of circulation. And that's a good thing, because mu is evading the antibodies much more than the Delta is. Delta is just more contagious there. So that's kind of good news, bad news. The data just came out showing that if you look after you've been exposed, and you can see that within 50 minutes of ever being exposed to the Delta variant, you have this huge amount of fusion activity, explosion of the virus inside your nasal cavity there. And that is why this variant is so dominant versus the traditional one that we saw, like the alpha one. You can see it's a factor of close to 4x versus the other one there. So the Delta is a very strong variant that may continue to dominate and squash any new variants that may emerge. So, and that's what we're seeing with the mu. So in case you do travel, what happens when you get positive? And you cannot really leave the country or wherever you are, and you may end up being put in quarantine and having to pay for these quarantines. So who is going to pay for that? More countries are now demanding, like the Bahamas and Costa Rica, that you basically have to get a certain coverage before you can enter the country. So let's kind of go through some of the travel insurance. I highly recommend, if you want to travel, that you don't end up in a situation there where they have to basically command a special plane to airlift to you under oxygen. So I've mentioned some companies here. There's a marketplace called InsureBuy that, you have different type of options there that can help you pay for the quarantine and trip interruption if you have to rebook your travels. There's Kovac Global that provides medical evacuation. They have airlifted people from the Maldives in the middle of nowhere in Africa. And there's MedJet Assist, which is also providing medical evaluation. So you really want to consider, if you want to travel, that it's not just getting your vaccination ready and your mask, but you just in case that you have an ability to come back here to get the right medical care. Also bring with you some test kits. And the advice of the expert is that don't wait just before you go to the airport to see if you're positive or negative, because by the time you get to the airport and you find out you have the wrong results, you could really be stuck. And so they recommend is that a few days before you're supposed to travel, test yourself so that you have some time to adjust your plans if needed. These are the tests we talked about last time. The Binax now from Abbott is around $14 to $25 there. They're hard to find. There's a bit of a backlog there. There's also Ellume COVID-19 and QuickView by Quidel. They're all antigen, which means they're not as accurate as the PCR. So what's recommended is that you repeat the test 3 to 5 days after you think you may have been exposed. Make sure that you swirl correctly your nostril there. And if you repeat the test, typically they say that after you repeat it twice, you have a pretty good chance to have a pretty good accuracy there. When in doubt, do a PCR test, of course. So why are we still worried? It turns out the data just came out that if you're over the age of 65 years old, you should still be concerned that you are at risk. The UK data just came out that unvaccinated 66 years old at the 30 times more likely to die than an unvaccinated 36-year-old. There's a direct relationship between your risk and your age group. And you can see this in the data that just came out from the UK based on their data set. In the US, the CDC just also released that 70% of the people who have a breakthrough case and that end up being hospitalized are patients over the age of 65. And so, yes, you have a low chance of being infected, but if you do get infected, you have unfortunately, still a high chance if you're over 65 to end up being hospitalized there. And in the UK, they started doing children's vaccination there with the objective there to decrease the spread. It's not necessarily to protect children because there's a low risk of infection and mortality and complications there, but it's really to stop the spread. So we're going to spend more time on this. So on the good news side, it's astonishing that we have been able in the last 10 months to vaccinate 40% of the world population. Now, that's being driven by Asia, who's done a really good job vaccinated, but Africa has a problem there. Africa is less than 10% of the African population is vaccinated. The US is kind of falling behind. As you can see, that the US will spend more time on that, is around 65% of their population there, compared to some of the European countries are in the 75% zone. Let's take a deeper dive on the US. Great news. We have dropped since I talked to you a month ago from 127,000 cases to 75 in 1 month. Mortality rate has dropped, but it's still 1,500 people a day. It's still a very high number. I mean, it still is our people there. It is pretty stunning there. We have now lost over 733,000 people there. It's descending a little bit there because, as you can see, hospitalization is usually 4 to 5 weeks behind. It's also dropping there. The good news is you can see most of the elderly over the age of 65 have at least one dose, 96%, and 85 are fully vaccinated there. So it's really the younger population that we need to help get vaccinated. The Delta has totally taken over the US. Mu, you can see that yellow thing, start trying to get a footprint, but couldn't, and really got squashed by the Delta there. So I think we still have to deal with the Delta. We want to make sure we don't end up with that Delta plus variant that came out of the UK. On the wave, the fourth wave we've been dealing with for the last few months there, we have dropped by 50% the incidence rate, so roughly from 46 to 23,000 per 100,000 people there. We still have an outbreak in Alaska. You can see it's very dark color there. It's still a very high incidence there. It seems to have stabilized a little bit there. And then in this region there, the Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, is still having a bit of a high community transmissions there. So be careful if you're traveling there. There are some very sad milestones. Worldwide, we have had around 242 million cases. In the US, 45 million cases, which is estimated to be undercounted by a factor of 2x. So the CDC's estimate is probably 90 million people. On the official death side, a very interesting analysis done by The Economist showing that instead of the 5 million worldwide reported by the authority fatality rate, they do believe the number is probably between 10 to 19 million people really died worldwide. The estimates of The Economist is around 16 million people there. And so let's kind of check it out exactly where is that huge variance there. And you can really see that the death in the US is probably pretty accurate, but what's reported worldwide is totally underestimated by a factor 2 to 4x. And that's Mexico and South America. You can see had a higher mortality than was being reported, as well as Russia. But the big difference is Asia. And of course, we knew in India, for example, that they were underreporting the fatality rate because they were only counting people who had a death certificate by a doctor, which most of them did not. And so that's estimated to be underestimated by a factor of 7x. Africa has also a problem of accuracy there, but so far Africa, hasn't really had a huge blowout like that happened in India, for example, there. So I think, we still have to be humbled by this virus there because that is a lot of people worldwide. Africa has been an estimate by the World Health Organization that 6 out of 7 cases are not being reported. And so right now, officially, it's 8 million cases, which doesn't seem like a lot, but they do believe it's around 59 to 60 million cases. And less than 10% of the continent has been vaccinated. And half of the African countries have less than 2% of their population that has been vaccinated. So that's kind of the big thing worldwide we have to work on. One of the problems is that they were trying to develop some contract with the Russian authority to deploy Sputnik, but Sputnik doesn't seem to be working very well. And for example, South Africa is no longer authorizing the Sputnik vaccine to be used there because they believe that there's a risk that will increase your chance of contracting HIV, which is a problem in the African continent. In the US, the New York Times did an interesting analysis estimating that out of the 700,000 people that have passed away, probably 200,000 could have been prevented if we had been able to deploy the vaccine to the population when it was available there. I don't want to go into the politics there, but I mean, that is a significant number there. And we're going to ask ourselves questions in the future about why we didn't do a better job. An analysis here showed the correlation between the mortality rate, which is normalized on the per 100,000 residents, between the states that have low vaccination rate versus high vaccination. It doesn't take a PhD in mathematics there to figure out there's a direct correlation between the vaccination rates of the state and their mortality rate. So please get vaccinated. 97% of the last 100,000 deaths were people unvaccinated. Another study from the CDC showed that you're 11 times higher risk of dying from COVID if you're unvaccinated. And this is interesting on the vaccination side. You can really see that Moderna, we've seen data over and over again for Moderna, I'm going to share more of it, seems to be slightly more effective being a protective against the virus there. And then we have Pfizer, and we know J&J is not as effective there. So that's not being confirmed with real world evidence being collected by the CDC. We have achieved 77% of the population over the age of 12 to have at least one dose, but you can see we don't have an increase of the vaccination rate. So we still need to work on that. So why is that important? Interesting data came out of Israel, and this was a situation there where they had an outbreak inside a hospital there. 96% of the patients and the caregiver were vaccinated. I emphasize 96%. Everybody was supposed to be vaccinated, but they were 5 months out after the second dose, i.e. the protection of the vaccine was waning down. And the healthcare worker were wearing surgical masks. Most of them were, they discovered were infected, but they were asymptomatic. So they were bringing that from wards to wards. So you can see that the original case was in one ward, and then via the healthcare worker, they start spreading out to all the other wards and spreading out across the hospital rate. What was a little bit humbling is that 24% of the patients got exposed end up being infected, and 10% of the healthcare workers that get exposed end up being infected there. So, so being vaccinated is still not a protection. I'm going to spend a bit more time on that. So why do we need booster shot? I'm going to spend some time on this slide there because this is brand new. The CDC made the final recommendation last night. So what's happening there? On the Pfizer side, they have approved a full dose. So it's the same amount of the vaccine that you had for the first or the second dose. And they claim that it has a 95.6% effectiveness against the Delta. And they used a study with 10,000 patients who had received 2 doses. On the average, this patient had had the last second dose 11 months ago. So that was the first group of people, the first cohort that they did a clinical trial with. And they saw the effectiveness across age, sex, race, ethnicity, and comorbidity, i.e. it works for everybody in English. And they had a very nice demographic there. So they had, half the people are between 16 to 55, a quarter of people are over 65 years old. So they believe it's representative of the population there. So that's the Pfizer one. Moderna has just been approved yesterday for half dose. And if you're over the age of 65 or a full dose, if you're immunocompromised, and I'll spend a bit more time of how do we define these high-risk people there. So if you go to your pharmacy, there's going to be a lot of confusion there because they're taking those doses from the same vial. And it's just a question of how much they basically withdraw with the syringe. So really, make sure that, you're, if you are immunocompromised and you want a stronger protection there, that you spend some time explaining you want the full dose there. The J&J has been approved for second dose, which they also call the booster, for everybody over the age of 18 years old. Well, the other one are approved for over 65 years old. Also, there's a lot of rumor they're going to drop this over time to 40 to 50 years old. The reason why they believe that, and we're going to spend a bit more time about, do you want another J&J or do you want something else? Because the other thing that happened is what's called the mix and match. And I'll show you the data the CDC used. It's really stunning. So hang in there because it now has been authorized that you can decide what your third dose is. You could pick between a J&J, a Moderna, and a Pfizer, regardless of what your first sets of vaccination shots were. So we're going to spend some time on that so you can make an informed decision there. So that's things that have just happened there. So let's take a look at the data. I'm going to spend some time in this. It's complicated, but it's really worth spending some time on. So in red is Moderna. Okay, so this is the boost, which is Moderna. In blue is J&J, so that's the second one here. And in purple is Pfizer. Okay. And what you can see is 2 types of antibody that they make the analysis at 15 and 29 days after they got the booster shots. And you can see in these cases here, we're going to look at how you basically go from the initial level of antibody when you got the shot to how much it increased. And look at this. This is a logarithmic scale. So this from here to there is a factor of 10x, and this is a factor of 100x. Okay, so these are big scales. And you can really see that all of them increase your protection by a factor of 10 to 100x. Okay, so that's the good news. But some are doing a better job than others. So if you look at the J&J, you can see that the J&J, after getting another J&J, which is this case here, you're still at a lower level of antibodies than if you had an mRNA. And a lot of the advisor of the CDC, or for the CDC did an official recommend that you do that, recommend that for people who had the one shot from J&J, they should get an mRNA as their booster. Because you can see the delta here is a factor of 10x of more antibodies that you can create if you get one of the mRNA. So in red is the Moderna, which is a little bit higher, but not by much compared to the Pfizer one, okay? So this is really, when they saw this data there, this is why they have allowed this mix and match. You decide, or you may ask the opinion of your doctor there, but it's really important that you look at this. If you look at Pfizer, and if you use Pfizer on Pfizer, this is this case, so you take the same one. If you use Moderna, which a lot of people are starting to do, because they think if you mix and match, you get a slightly different vaccine, which means you have a broader response on the antibodies there. And so this one looks a little bit higher there. And, so a lot of people who had Pfizer's have decided to take mRNA, or you can take this, but please don't take the J&J. That doesn't make any sense. And so same thing here. This is the neutralizing antibody. This is called the IgG. The IgG lasts a few weeks. The neutralized antibody is the one you want to see long term. And these are the one that last 6-7 months. That's the one that's harder to measure. But you can really see the case there that, the mix and match makes sense. And the mRNAs are more effective as a booster than the J&J as a second dose. Okay. So the next approval are for children. And there's two groups of children, the 5 to 11 years old. Pfizer has submitted their data, and they have just announced literally this morning that their effectiveness is at 90.7%. They did 2 trials with 2,000 patients each. So they really look at the safety just to make sure there was not an increase in side effects and all of that. They're going to be used 1/3 of the dose. So an adult, you get 30 microgram. As a younger person there, a younger child, you get 10 micrograms. So just make sure that they pay attention there. The good news is that it's going to be shipped to the pharmacies in a different vial, and they should be using a smaller needle. So hopefully that will decrease the chance of confusion or the wrong selection there. But if you're parents, just make sure that you keep an eye on that. Also most children's there have not really had complication. We still have had 1.8 million cases of children between 5 to 11 years old and 143 related deaths due to COVID there. So it's still a low probability, but we still need to protect them. The big worry is that we want to stop the infection to spreading as people go to school and come back into the community there. So the biggest reason why we want to really protect children at school is to stop the infection spreading around. This is the data. I've give you the link there, so you can literally download the Pfizer filing if you really want to go deep into what they did. And you can really see that starting at 14 days, probably honestly, that looks more like 18 to 20 days. That's when you start having a protection. The full effect seems to be at around 60 days is when you have the biggest delta there between people who get infected and people who don't get infected. So in blue, these are the group that had the vaccine, and in red is the control group that still got infected there. So it is effective. I'm going to show you some of the data on side effects. And again, it's in the PDF that you can download, and they did 3 doses, 10 microgram, 20, and 30. And you can really see that there was more side effects, not very significant, but for the redness, the swelling, and the pain and the ejection side, which is probably why they decided to really go with 10 micrograms, for the children there to decrease the potential side effects there. The next review are for the younger class of children between 2 to 5 years old and the 6 months to 2 years old. The data is expected in the 4th quarter to be released, so in the coming months. The clinical trials are at the end there, so hopefully we can get something by the end of the year or early next year. And another data set is on hold, and Moderna had filed for a vaccine authorization for the adolescent market. These are children between 12 to 17 years old. It is on hold right now as the FDA and the CDC are looking at the risk for myocarditis. Myocarditis is a very rare inflammation of the heart, and the incidence is so low, it's being estimated to be 1 per 10,000 and 1 per 100,000, that they cannot get the information from trials that have only 2,000 to 3,000 children there. So right now they're trying to have these discussions internally there about how do we address some of the myocarditis that has emerged with younger men, between 18 to 30 years old that we have reported in the past, and is there a similar risk for the younger population? So that's on hold. But remember that Pfizer has been approved for that population between 12 to 17 years old. That is available. So Pfizer is showing that at 7 months, the protection has dropped drastically. So they did a study at Stanford here in California, And they saw a decline of 6-fold for female and 7-fold for men of the neutralizing antibodies at 7 months. And that's important there because the T cells was also significantly downregulated. And we had the whole hope that the T cells is your immune system. It's like the second level of defense after neutralizing antibodies to protect yourself. And you could really see the drop from the time people got their second dose to basically 7 months later. So some data I got from Israel show that you can be as low as 15 to 30% protection at 7 to 8 months. So you're not protected after 7 to 8 months. You do need a booster. So let's look at the data the CDC and the FDA used. And this is absolutely telling. And so I'm going to spend some time there because it's really important you make your decision there. So it is very clear that the vaccine effectiveness against infection hospitalization, especially for people of the age of 65, are dropping significantly there. And if we look at the Pfizer data, and if you look at all the age brackets there, you can see all of them are dropping there. This is around 210 days there. They're around 64% protection there. And the Delta is what the problem is. You can see that pre-Delta, was holding pretty well, but the Delta is really a much nastier virus because if you remember, it's 100 times more infectious. If you look at Moderna, it's a little bit better, it's 0.7, but pretty much all the age groups are going down over time. So we're really losing your vaccine protection after 6 to 7 months. Let's look at J&J, and J&J is at 0.56%, so 56% effectiveness. We knew it was lowered there. It seems to be more steady than the mRNA is there, but at a much lower rate. The CDC also reported what's called a hospitalization network. So this is a surveillance group that represent around 10% of the US population in coverage there. So it's a very large data set. And they look at what they have observed there. And what you can see is that at 5 months, the protection against hospitalization has dropped quite a bit from the original one, 93% to 78%. So it's not only dropping against infection, because you could get infected, have mild symptoms there, but you also see the protection against hospitalization dropping there. So it's clearly weaning off of the vaccine. Another data set here is showing, in this case, I'm going to look at the Moderna is at 86% and the Pfizer is at 73%. So it's still, holding pretty well, but you can really see over time it's dropping, especially for the people over the age of 65. And that's why the CDC and the FDA have decided to authorize the booster for people of the age of 65, because you can really see the drop there, where for the younger population, it seems to be holding pretty well against hospitalization and severe cases. Now, if you're in a nursing home, because most of people in nursing home are over the age of 75 to 80 years old, you can see how it dropped there. I mean, it dropped as low as 53%, and Moderna and Pfizer there are like 52 to 50%. Okay. So clearly, people in the nursing home needs to get this booster ASAP. If you have a loved one in nursing home, you really want to help facilitate that. Real world evidence from Israel is confirming that if you do get a booster, you do get a higher protection there. And the way they have done that is by looking at the infection rate and what happened after they start giving boost to the population there. And you can see the population there that didn't get a booster, this is by age group, this is really interesting there, continue to get more and more infections there, where people got a booster, the drastic drop of the infection rate 12 days after they got their boosters there. So clearly the booster has allowed them to take control of the infection rate that was spreading. And it's across, in their cases, they're doing pretty much the whole population has access to the booster in Israel, not just people over the age of 65. And you can see in this case, they broke it down into when they started giving the booster. First, it was 60 years old, and then a month later, 50, and then the 40 to 30, and then pretty much everybody over age 16. That's when they got to that younger population that they were able to stop the progression of the disease, and they really stopped the positivity rate, which was close to 7% there, to drop to 2% as soon as the population ended up with a booster there. A big delta is when you separate the people who are unvaccinated from people vaccinated, and you can really see that the infection is really driven by people who are not vaccinated, but the people who are vaccinated really drop down very quickly there. So the booster are working, and this is based on the whole country population there. So it's real world evidence. The good news is that there's less side effect for the third dose. And I've heard this anecdotally from everybody I know who had that. Look at the amount of side effects on the population basis, so it's normalized there. You can really see that we all learned the hard way that the second dose was a bit more painful than the first dose. The good news is that the third dose seems to have less side effects, and that's probably because the body's more used to it. So don't assume you're going to be wiped out. It may still happen there. So it is not going to happen there. So other good news is Merck has submitted to the FDA for an antiviral that you can use as soon as you have the first symptoms there. Think about Tamiflu, which you're supposed to use within a few days of the first sign of the flu. It's the same concept here. So this is a drug you take orally there that will decrease by 50% your chance of you being hospitalized. Okay. And so the US has already committed to buy 1.7 million doses of treatment for $1.2 billion. The World Health Organization, the Gates Foundation have committed to basically buy a generic version and try to make them into manufacturing outfits across the world for giving access to low-income countries there. So the earliest it's going to be reviewed is by November 30th. I wish they were a bit faster, but I think the FDA has been kind of busy with the boosters. So we should expect that probably in the next few months to have that approval there. So that'd be great news, because that will allow people to get something to control the virus as soon as you have the first symptoms. And then the statins, if a lot of people are on statins there, and the data just came out from San Diego that it decreased by 41% your risk of having a hospital death, i.e. you may still be hospitalized there, but you're going to have a lower severity of the cases there and less complication there. So all of you on statins there, that sounds like a very, very good risk. So don't stop your statins. So I'm going to post a different video on the 23rd on long COVID. You don't want to miss it, because I do think that's the biggest risk of COVID is having these long-term symptoms there. So please, watch that video when I post on YouTube. A reminder, I do need your help. YouTube has changed the algorithms there, so I do need your help to post to your network, so that if you appreciate this content, please spread it to your network. We have to do it the old-fashioned way, which is by network effect. So thank you very much, and stay healthy.